Tourists of Reddit, what was the most fucked up thing you saw in another country?
The guy that flashed my friends and I in a very nice park in Central Europe. We were having a picnic. He was very polite about it, saying, "Excuse me girls, I'm just going to masturbate in front of you." And then did so.
What a gentleman.
In a small town in Korea, I saw two guys run out of a restaurant. One of them was holding a 10-inch kitchen knife and shoved it into the other guy's belly. The guy's standing there holding the knife in his gut, and an old lady comes out of the restaurant and starts hitting him in the head with her shoe. Two other guys jumped on the stabber and held him on the ground. Ambulance came and loaded the stabby and drove away. Cops came and drove the stabber away. Restaurant owner came out with a bucket of water and washed the blood off his steps. Turned out it was a wedding party, and there was a bit of a disagreement.
You're supposed to cut the cake, not the cousin.
Dothraki wedding done right.
Cyprus in the mid-90s, I was 15 and on holiday with my parents. I saw an old Cypriot guy getting beaten within an inch of his life by a young Russian guy, after a row over unpaid rent. As I understood it, the Russian was renting an apartment of the victim. Police promptly turned up and dragged the Russian guy into the nearest building. The Cypriot guy was taken to hospital by ambulance, and a short while later the Russian guy was brought out of the building on a stretcher and was also taken to hospital once the police had dealt with him.
The Cypriot guy was taken to hospital by ambulance, and a short while later the Russian guy was brought out of the building on a stretcher and was also taken to hospital once the police had dealt with him. Oh man, you can tell I'm from Eastern Europe that I knew this was coming before I even got there. I just read that and thought, yeah, that sounds about right.
I had a knife pulled on me in Germany by a couple of crackheads. And in Thailand a tourist was smoking a joint on. The police started beating the shit out of him. Had an officer holding each arm and leg while another just kept jumping as high as he could and dropping knees onto the man's face. He started convulsing and foaming at the mouth, so they threw him in the back of the police van and drove away.
Doesn't Thailand have the death penalty for drug smugglers? WTF was this dude thinking?
I have no idea. Everyone who goes there knows what they're like about things like that. The guy was crazy smoking it right on the strip.
I was hearing an argument happen in an apartment complex between a couple, and then I heard a gunshot, and then silence. This was in Venezuela.
My family went to Aruba about 10 years ago and did an island tour that ended at beach where we could see Venezuela from the shore. My mom asked our tour guide if he thought we could do a day trip to Venezuela. He laughed and said I'm darker skinned and I wouldn't go there. You wouldn't last an hour.
It's pretty bad. A day or two later from the gunshot, I saw kids in an overpass throw bricks down into a highway of ongoing cars. The kids were shattering people's windshield who were going 60 miles per hour. It was pretty scary. Luckily we didn't get hit.
They do this so people have to pull over and then they rob them. Something similar happened to my dad. People threw an old washing machine off an overpass trying to hit his car. Venezuela is an absolutely beautiful but incredibly poor country. Poverty makes some people do terrible, desperate things to survive. Source: I was born in Venezuela and a lot of my family still lives there.
I have friends from there, and they can attest how bad it is. There's a major gap between the rich and poor there combined, which contributes to the high crime. Any displays of wealth will get you robbed quick.
It's pretty bad. I had an Arab Muslim friend in high school whose family used to live in Venezuela before they came to live in the States. His family said they were going on vacation back to Venezuela. Turned out they were planning to kill him because they found out he was gay and wanted to commit the murder there so they could get away with it. Luckily my friend got away, but he was stranded there with no identification for a long time. When he came back it was hard to find his parents and charge them with attempted murder. He is doing okay now, but this was a horrible thing that happened to him, and I was worried about him for months because I barely heard from him, and was worried he wouldn't be able to come back. I'm also Latina and know there is a lot of crime there, so I was worried that even if his parents didn't manage to kill him, somebody else might.
Their uncle sells new windshields.
I had a friend from Venezuela. He told me that one day he was going out with a friend and at his car someone held a gun to his head and asked for his wallet, which he obviously gave. When I expressed how scary that must have been, he shrugged and said, "That's Venezuela." Edit, missed a word.
Was in Mexico City for a work assignment. Had just gone to dinner in the Zona Rosa, pink zone. Walking back to the hotel, I saw a hit and run. A pedestrian was thrown through the air and flung to the ground. A lot of people witnessed this, and an ambulance was called. The ambulance came screaming around the corner, going really fast, and hit another pedestrian, who then was thrown through the air and flung to the ground. It was awful. Edit, thank you for the award.
This sounds like a dark comedic sketch.
This sounds like GTA LMAO.
I'm going to hell for laughing at this.
Back in 1978, when I was 10, I went to Jamaica with my mom. One morning after coming out of the British Embassy, I saw 4 baby mongoose in a rain gully about 5 feet deep behind where we were waiting for a bus. I thought they were adorable and started feeding them by throwing them biscuits. Some guy saw me doing that, walked over and dropped a large brick on them, killing them instantly. I was pretty inconsolable for several hours.
I didn't even know there were mongooses in Jamaica. I wonder if they consider them pests or what.
I'm sitting in St. Thomas writing this and lived briefly in St. Croix in the 90s. All across the Caribbean, most islands were slave-operated sugar plantations. But after a while, the ships carrying goods from the various islands introduced rats to the islands. The rats would chew the base of the sugar canes, wiping out the crop. So the plantation owners brought black rat snakes to the islands to exterminate that rats. However, upon seeing the snakes, the slaves refused to work in the fields. So in order to get rid of the snakes, the plantation owners introduced the mongoose. Make no mistake, those little fuckers are 10x meaner than any rat. To this day, there are absolutely no snakes on any Caribbean island where the mongoose was introduced, and the rats live in the tree tops, safe from the mongoose.
If I remember correctly, mongoose are seen as a nuisance animal, at best, in Jamaica. They're an invasive species that's really rough on some native species.
In Nepal, I saw a 2-year-old sitting alone on a busy sidewalk. She had a cup for begging.
Was in Serbia and my colleague I was there with, and I had rented a car to go explore the beautiful country. We followed Google Maps, but end up on a dirt road in some small village-like area and then had to make a turn. It was heavily raining and we got the car stuck. We couldn't get it unstuck on our own, so we wanted to ask for help, and as we approached the first nearby house, a large dog came running out barking loudly, and an elderly-looking man came out with a rifle yelling at us in Serbian. We decided next house was a better bet, and they were the kindest people on earth. We told them that we had tried the other house with no luck, and they told us we were lucky to be alive. Apparently the man had a reputation, but they didn't want it to further into details. No more dirt roads for me, thanks.
It is always good to get a local tour guide when moving around in a foreign country.
A reputed local tour guide. I have heard some stories of people hiring what seem to be nice guides based on word of mouth, only to get mugged or worse.
I was walking through a forest in central France when I came across a group of old-style horse-drawn gypsy caravans in a clearing. They were obviously very old and looked like they had just been abandoned. There was a very eerie, unsettling feel to the place, so I took a few photos and moved on. A couple of days later, I was talking to an old guy in the village, and he explained that the gypsies had been dragged from their wagons and murdered by the invading Nazis during WW2. Out of respect, the surviving gypsies in the region just left the caravans where they were.
Do you still have the pictures?
Somewhere. This was in about 1995, so it was all on film. I'll try and dig them out.
You gotta share them.
Name